My name is Casper de Jonge. I'm a program manager on the Fabric CAT team, a customer advisory team. Really exciting to see so many people here talk about this amazing, exciting topic, security. I know it's a pretty lofty goal, like Michael was saying, 50 minutes, everything you need to know. So I'm going to try to get you started on understanding Fabric and understanding all the security that applies. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things to do. So we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about probably the most important topic, Fabric as a SaaS platform. Fabric is a SaaS platform. It's not a PaaS platform. What does that mean? We'll talk about it. Authentication. How do we authenticate to Fabric? Network protection. How do we do inbound protection? How can I connect to secure data? How do we encrypt data at Fabric? How do we do item level security? Data residency, also a very important topic. How do we take care of that for you? And we'll talk about data governance and compliance too. So again, there's a lot to talk about. So let's talk about Fabric as a SaaS platform. These slides you've probably seen. I've stolen these from the marketing deck, but only a few. But they are really important to set the context of what Fabric is and why we have chosen to do it the way we want. Because as we all know, more and more data is coming in. We've been saying this for many years, and it's true. More and more data is coming into your organization. How do you translate all of that data to competitive advantage? How can you, and your organization, how can you make sure that people inside of your organization get to the data and do something with it? This, I love showing this slide. This is the current landscape. Every little dot in here is a product that you can use, not just Microsoft, all the products that you can use to do analytics, machine learning, application, appliances, infrastructure. All of these are different products. And as an IT organization, to do a project, we have to tie them all together. And we've heard this from a lot of our organizations that we talk to. Instead of tying stuff together, I don't want to be an integration officer. I want to be a data officer. I want the discussion to be talking about data, not about networking and all of these things. I want to be able to connect and work about with data. So that's where Fabric comes in, right? Fabric is a complete analytics platform, unified product, unified experience, unified architecture, delivered as a SaaS product. Yesterday, we did a panel discussion and someone was asking, what does a SaaS product even mean? A SaaS product means, like my old manager, when I was still on the Power BI team, when we started with Power BI, we had this goal. 5 seconds to sign up and 5 minutes to wow. It means you should be able to sign in and sign up to our SaaS service within 5 seconds, and within 5 minutes, you should be able to have some data that you can do something with. You should be wowed by the experience. That is a lofty goal, and that's what a software as a service, SaaS, gives you. You don't have to worry about a lot of things. We take care of things for you. Of course, you pay us for it, but that's why we take care of all these things for you behind the covers. And it's similar to Office is a SaaS service. Office 365 is a SaaS service. Salesforce, Dynamics, they're all SaaS services. Power Apps, the whole Power Platform, those are all SaaS services. Power BI, obviously, is a SaaS service. And now we have a complete analytics platform as a SaaS service. Lake-centric and open. It's a common SaaS data lake shared by all compute engines. Deep commitments for open formats and APIs. So even though we have a SaaS platform, it's still, you write the data into one lake, you can still connect it with everything else. Okay. So let's talk about, again, so what is that Fabric? I won't spend too much time on this because we've all seen this slide many, many, many times by now. One lake, one place where you put all the data and all the different types of compute on top of it, experiences / workloads. Data factory, Synapse data engineering, data science, warehouse, real-time, Power BI, data activator, all works on the same set of data. Now, when we start talking about today we're going to mostly talk about, okay, the security and the governance. What does Fabric do and what does it mean? Fabric is secure by default. You have end-to-end visibility and it's always governed. And we'll talk about all these topics today. So what are the challenges that people face today? What are the modern data challenges? The first thing, and what we want and what we need are too often at odds in these situations. Because we want to bring data to the masses. Everyone should have access to data to make decisions. We want to have access to the instant access to the latest data, no copying around. We've been saying this for, I don't know how long, when we started doing big data, no copying around, we don't want any of that. At the same time, we have a modern workplace, especially after COVID. people working from home, working on the holiday, bring your own devices, whatever, they still want to get access to that data. Your CFO wants to wake up in the morning and open up his Power BI report and see the latest data. Okay, that should be possible, even when he's on holiday or when he's traveling. At the same time, okay, you need to secure, govern, audit your data to protect customers and the company. That's a given, but how do you do it? That's a tough one. SaaS platforms are designed with these challenges in mind. It is a big shift, and this is a lot of conversations we're seeing with customers, and when I talk to a lot of us, it's a shift from siloed PaaS services. Like if I go back to this slide before, like even the PaaS services, the way we do it today, that's a lot. These are all PaaS services: Azure ADLS, Synapse, Databricks, you name it. They're all siloed PaaS services, and you have to tie them together. It's your job when you use these services to tie them together. With Fabric, that is no longer the case. Okay, so shift from siloed to PaaS. So when we start talking about network security, there are these network security requirements that oftentimes come up. 90% of the time, it means people need to be able to connect that data inside a firewall private link from Fabric. That's what we call outbound protection. And we'll talk about how you do it in a second. The second one is inbound protection. A lot of organizations want to say, well, I only want to be able to, I want to make sure that when people connect to my data, to my Fabric or to whatever it is, I can trust them. What I like to say is a password is not enough. Like a password is not enough because the password can be lost. You can accidentally check it into your GitHub account. Everything is open and you're gone. So we need to have more stringent security around who is authenticating to my service. We need to have secure access to the backend service. Very traditional approach, front-end systems, a Power BI report to a backend system, Azure Synapse sitting in the backend. So we need to have secure access to it. And then we have some more stringent requirements for FSIs, healthcare services. The traffic needs to be private, not via public internet, or endpoints should not be open to the public internet. These are often questions you will hear when you're talking about larger organizations when they are talking about what their security needs to be. Now, and again, if you kind of think about how you solve a lot of these things in existing PaaS world, this is a very simplified diagram, overview of how you would solve a problem like this inside of Azure. But this is kind of how it would work. So you have your Synapse that you put inside of a private network, no public internet connection, you've cut that off, but you want to read data from ADLS. You want to make sure that data, when you read it from ADLS, doesn't go over the public internet. It goes over a private network connection. So I need to set up private networking to be able to do so. And my developers also need to be able to connect to it. So they also need to connect to my private network through private endpoints to be able to connect to these services and do something with it. And then finally, I want to give it out to my organization. I need to poke a hole in the whole private network. So I use probably on-premise data gateway installed onto a VM inside of that private network to be able to connect to Power BI, which then actually is open to the public internet. Okay, this is a usual thing that we do. So the PaaS services are disconnected. All communication go to a configured to go to this private endpoint. Developers connect to a VPN and connect to the backend services. The data sources are connected to self-hosted runtime or on-premise data gateways. And when the CEO accesses data in Power BI report, the data is imported into Power BI or going through the gateway with Direct Query or Live Connect. So this is an existing PaaS. In Fabric, the world looks much simpler. Again, users connect from the SaaS to the SaaS service from a global network. Endpoints and access are protected through Entra ID, and we'll talk more about this in a second. Now, the first big difference is, if you remember back from this slide, when I want to connect from Synapse and I want to read data from an ADLS, I want to make sure it doesn't go over the public internet, so I need to set up my private endpoints and private networks to be able to have that connection. In Fabric, we take care of that for you. So when your Synapse or your Synapse data warehouse reads from one lake, it actually already uses our own private backbone. So there's no public internet involved at all here. And every endpoint is accessed and protected to Entra ID. And the interesting thing here, so when we start talking about copying around, when your CEO accesses data in a Power BI report on his mobile phone, the data is directly read from his mobile phone to data sitting in the lake. No copying around. So it goes, slices through directly through the whole stack using direct lake and things like this. So it looks simpler, but let's go into a bit more details on this. By the way, if you want to know more about this, when you go back, I know we're talking about a lot of stuff today. If you search for Fabric Security Overview, you get to a security document that has all of this information and much more in much more details. This is a picture I stole from there. Because, again, Fabric is a SaaS service. A lot of times people talk to me about like, okay, I want to make sure we have a front end and a back end system, and Power BI is the front end and Synapse is the back end system. Well, in Fabric, we already do this for you. Fabric, already, when you connect to Fabric, first of all, every connection that goes to Fabric is going through Entra ID. We'll talk about this in a second, to authenticate and trust all the requests. All the clusters are automatically protected between backend services and VNets. So when I connect to Fabric and I want to do a warehouse, first of all, the front end is Fabric. You connect to Fabric as the front end. The backend service is our own warehouse instances that we're running in the back. They're all protected behind VNets. You don't have to configure it. We do it for you. So you don't have to worry about all of these things. We take care of that for you. It's a VNet managed by us, not by you. But there's still sitting behind there. So there's no direct access to any of these backend services to the public internet. They're all going through a front-end service that redirects it to the backend services through VNets managed by us. Traffic between these experiences always goes over the Microsoft backend service. So we take care of that traffic. It doesn't go over the public internet. Again, a big difference when you have to tie services together yourself. You have to take care of that for you. You have to set up the network. Here, we do it for you. And then finally, when you're connecting to Fabric, like a client wants to connect from his browser or his mobile phone to the Fabric service, it is always encrypted by at least TLS 1.2. So all data that is going over the wire is encrypted. Yeah, question? Sorry, I couldn't hear it. What about shortcuts? We'll talk about that in a second, but even shortcuts, same. We'll talk about these things in a second. So, okay, so Fabric is built as a SaaS product. This is a completely different way of thinking about things than it is when you have to think about a PaaS service where you have to connect all of these things together yourself. Okay, so let's start talking about authentication. So first of all, whatever you do with Fabric, it's always you have to go through authentication with Entra. This is the same authentication you use for your Office, the same authentication you use for Dynamics, the same authentication you use for logging into your system probably. So Entra is at the heart of everything. And yeah, it's configured for all these applications at once. Now let's talk about inbound protection options. It's tightly coupled to Entra. There's two ways in Fabric that you can do inbound protection options. A lot of customers have been asking us, oh, we need private networks. We need private networks for Fabric. That is what we call perimeter network security. And I'll talk in details about this in a second. The other approach is zero trust approach. I actually have a session, 20-minute session on zero trust approach tomorrow here too, where we talk more about the concept, why zero trust is important. But zero trust is the way to do security in a SaaS environment. Because perimeter secures the perimeter. You have a VPN, you have a network, you have a whatever it is, and you trust everything that is sitting inside of that perimeter. So when you have access to a VPN and you log in somewhere, then you have full access because you are secured. That's trusted. Zero trust approach is a way that says, okay, we always assume breach. We never trust who's connecting, and we re-verify the connection at all times. It's a different way of thinking, and I'll talk more about this in a second when we talk about the options. So let's talk about option number one. So when we talk about zero trust and connectivity, and again, this is not just for Fabric, right? This is the same way that you would secure Office. It's the same way you would secure Dynamics. It's the same way you're securing any SaaS platform. Like Salesforce, you do the same things. Verify explicitly, use the least privilege access, and then you always assume breach. You don't have to take care of that for you. Entra takes care of that for you. Entra takes care of it for you when you're logging in. And what does that mean? So, for example, with Entra ID, you can have this adaptive access. The first thing that is very important is, okay, for example, multi-factor authentication. When I say earlier, a password is not enough, is we want to make sure that, hey, when I log in, I need to be this extra layer of verification. So for example, multi-factor authentication. Okay, I log in, my phone starts blinking and says, is it really you? Yeah, it's me. Okay, now I'm logged in. Or, and this is where things get really interesting, is with conditional access. And with conditional access, you can completely configure who can access your service with many different variations and types. And I'll talk more about this in a second. And even further out is user and entity behavior analytics. Like, okay, I'm now in the UK and I'm logging into Fabric, but at the same time I'm logging into Fabric from the Netherlands where I live. Something is up. My system is going to get messages saying something is not right. Like he can be logging in at the same time from two different places. So he's going to detect based on anomalies and things like this, whether or not you're supposed to be logging in to this service you want to. And this is where things get interesting. Because these conditional access policies, when a lot of people talk about, okay, we need to make sure that whenever someone connects to Fabric, we know we can trust who he is. And instead of you having to use a VPN or logging into situations like this, you can configure Entra by saying, okay, I want to make sure that when someone connects to Fabric, he always uses a device that he got from my IT department, a trusted device. You can only log into Fabric from a trusted device. For example, on my phone, this is also a good example of it, my phone only is a trusted device when it's managed by Microsoft, so they have installed some software on my phone. When I don't update my phone quickly enough to the latest and greatest firmware, they will kick me off and I'm not able to use Fabric anymore for my phone. Like, we didn't have to build it. This is all built into Entra. So there's lots of different varieties and things. So, but it does mean I don't have to be physically in the office. To be honest, I haven't been to the office for 2.5 years. I haven't seen my office in 2.5 years. And I haven't been there. But I can log into all my stuff, no problem. I can connect to data when I'm on holiday, when I'm here. I can always do these things because I'm verified and trusted. They're using a ton of signals to determine I am a trusted person. First of all, I log in, I have multi-factor authentication, I have a trusted device, and so on and so on. You can go pretty crazy. You can even configure, if you want to, I only want to be able to connect to Fabric when I'm inside of the corporate office by using IP addresses. It is possible. It's not recommended because this is kind of going against the zero trust approach. What you should be doing is thinking about, okay, I want to make sure the corporate devices are managed devices, and then I trust the managed device as such so they can be at home too, and so on. So you use signals and decisions to enforce it. You can do devices, you can do applications, you can do network locations, you can have users and groups. So it's all AD based, so you can go ahead and say only a specific group can log in, or you can even say, well, admins can only log in when they're on the corporate device, but other users, they can always log in or whatever. But this Entra conditional access policies allows you to determine who can access or not. Now, we also just recently released private links. And private links is the other approach, not the zero trust, but the network perimeter approach. Because what you do then is you put Fabric inside of a private network and you cut it off from the public internet completely. Okay? There's two options. Private links is the top one, and you have Entra conditional access policy. But what does it mean? And this is where a lot of people get confused, especially when we start talking about a SaaS product like Fabric. First of all, it means Fabric is disconnected from the public internet. This has massive implications. And it means Fabric, also means Power BI, right? Because Power BI is also Fabric. So it means Fabric is cut off from the public internet. That means every user needs to connect to the private network to get access to your device. Okay? So this means now your CFO wants to wake up in the morning, he has to make sure he's on the VPN to be able to connect to his reports and dashboards. You're no longer able to load resources locally. So potentially it leads to slower reports. This is mostly a problem when you have a multinational organization. So one of the things that we do with Fabric is, when I open my Fabric here today, my home tenant, the way we've set it up at Microsoft, is obviously in Seattle. When I log in, 80% of the network traffic goes to the data center, probably now, I don't know, maybe in Dublin or here somewhere in the UK. Because all the content that is not related to data HTML, CSS, images, whatever HTML content there is, all gets loaded locally, closest to where I am. Only the data gets loaded. Maybe if I have a capacity here, data gets loaded from capacity here, but it always goes back to the home tenant. If you have a private network, you need a VPN. Your VPN can only be set up once. So you need to VPN probably into the US. That means now all the traffic has to go to the US, get loaded in there, and then come back to me. There's no way around it. That's the way it works. And then finally, you have to pay for it too. Someone had a light moment. No. So we increase express route bandwidth and added cost for private links, because now all the traffic that goes into Fabric, whether it's opening a Power BI report or anything else, it goes over the express route bandwidth, and it adds cost for private links. So all these things are things that you have to keep in mind. So there's two different options. Private links, there's actually a document too. It's called Inbound Protection for Fabric that covers this in a bit more details. What the two options are and why you can choose. Oh yeah, actually I forgot probably the most important one. There are several product limitations. When you put, even today, we have private links for Power BI, but almost no one uses it because you have product limitations. For example, you cannot use on-premise data gateway if you want to use that. There are many other limitations too. So you have to be careful because, again, we close off Fabric to the public internet, so not everything is possible. Okay, so several product limitations. Okay, so that's inbound protection. But actually, when we talk to customers and they say we need private endpoints for Fabric, they actually mean this. We need to get secure data into Fabric. So how can you get secure data into Fabric? Load it from a data sitting in a VNet into Fabric. First of all, you can push data. You can connect to OneLake and push data in using Data Factory, Databricks, Synapse Spark, and just push that data and land it into OneLake. You can use Dataflow Gen 2 by using on-premise data gateway installed inside of the VNet network, or the new VNet data gateway to connect to that data sitting in the network. For Fabric Spark, we now have managed private endpoints too, which you can install, and then you can connect with Spark to data that is sitting inside of a VNet. And soon, hopefully very soon, with Fabric pipelines, you should be able to use on-premise data gateway too. So you can install the on-premise data gateway inside of a private network, connect to it, and load the data into Fabric. And finally, this is where things get the most interesting. With Trusted Workspace Access that just got released, you are able to create a shortcut to an ADLS that is sitting behind a private network. So then you can connect to it and make it part of Fabric through this trusted network connection that you have there. So there are many ways that you can get data and load the data from within a VNet, of course. This situation changed pretty recently because we released this feature, and this feature in the last 2 weeks, I think. So it's all pretty recent. But yeah, before that, it was a bit limited on what you can do. Probably Trusted Workspace Access is one of the best features to be able to connect the data that is sitting in ADLS. And then you can shortcut it, and you can do with it what you want. All right, so let's talk about data encryption in Fabric. I actually had an interesting customer discussion early this morning in the booth, too. I say, oh, what about encryption? Well, again, a lot of these things are taken care of it for you by Fabric. For example, in transit, we have two different types, in transit and at rest. In transit, I kind of talked about it already, but transport layer security, TLS 1.2 is always enforced. All the endpoints have encryption protocols, and then all internal communications encrypted in transit too. Again, if you want to know more details, Fabric security overview page is the starting point that points you to all the documentation in much more details here. But finally, encryption at rest, right? Whenever you upload data to OneLake, it automatically will get encrypted. So data automatically gets encrypted. It gets encrypted by us, by Microsoft managed keys. The customer data, metadata, and cache are all encrypted. The platform managed keys, secure, convenient, and low overhead, so you don't have to do anything. We will take care of the encryption. We can get access to it either, and BitLocker encryption wherever available, applicable. We don't have customer managed key yet for Fabric. That is something we are working on, where you want to bring your own keys if you want to encrypt data using your own keys. We have it for Power BI. We bring your own key, but not for data sitting in the lakehouse. That is something that we're working on. But by default, you don't have to worry about the data is encrypted at rest. All right, so now let's talk more about fine-grained security and access controls in Fabric 2. So this is also a topic that comes up quite a bit. I think I was saying it yesterday when we were talking about it in the panel discussion too. Microsoft made a mistake by talking about one security and saying it's not coming, and people assuming there is no security in Fabric. Well, we have exactly the same security in Fabric, the way that you've always had it in Synapse, the way you've always had it in Power BI or in Azure Analysis Services. So there's many different levels of security. First of all, platform level security. We've kind of already talked about it before, right? Authentication through Entra, inbound through private link conditional access. Then we have domains. So you can have domain-specific configurations by domain admins. This is pretty limited in what we support today, but expect more to show up there. Like we already have admin settings that you can have delegate to domains already today, and that hopefully we'll get more about that in the coming months. Workspace level access. This is question. Sorry, give me a second because it's impossible for me to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. As far as I understand it, if we do have object level security in the warehouse, we also say goodbye to Direct Lake. So any chances of you fixing that?
So I'll talk about it in a sec. So we have a few levels of security: platform level security, domain-specific configurations, and workspace level security. This is the same way as it is today in Power BI, right? You have a workspace, you can have a boundary for managing artifacts, you have admin, contributors, and viewers, and then we have the next level of security is compute level security. So you can have warehouse access, you can grant deny access, semantic models, and warehouse with RLS and OLS. And what the question was about right now is there's actually, so when you define security in the warehouse and you want to build a direct lake model on top, direct lake will say, well, you have security built on your warehouse, so we're going to do a fallback, and we're going to always go to direct query mode. Now, there is a way around this. First of all, you can turn off fallback. And second of all, the way that we would say, and actually this is also covered in the security overview document, there's a small example about it. But what you can do today is, and this is probably the number one way I would say you want to give out reports and dashboards to people in the organization is through apps. So the way, when you give access to someone with an app, the way that it works today is when you give someone access to an app and you want to use Direct Lake, with apps, you don't have to have access on the workspace today in Power BI. Because you can use roll-up security on the data set, you have no access to the workspace, you cannot do anything. The problem is, in Fabric, if you don't have access to the workspace, you don't have access to files in the lakehouse, and Direct Lake will give you an error saying, I can't do anything here because I don't have access to the lakehouse. What you can do is you can switch the user. That's a new feature that came pretty recently. You can switch the user who's connecting to the lakehouse. So you can have it be a managed account or something like this, where you can have the user connect to the Direct Lake as a particular user, but still have RLS apply on Direct Lake. So what happens is the user connects to the app in Power BI, the report opens up, it connects to the data set, and the data set then recognizes the user who's connecting because you have roll-up security set up. The roll-up security gets applied. The data gets read from Direct Lake using that other account that you've configured because he doesn't have access to the lake. He cannot read the data sitting in the lake. The data gets returned as that other account, and then only the data that you have access to gets sent back to the end users. Yeah, I want to say we can talk more about it afterwards. It is described in the documentation page on how this works. But that is really a way that it can work today. Now, finally, item level security. So today, the only thing that we have is read-only access for your OneLake or read access to a subset of the data. One thing here on the bottom that I was allowed to talk about here today, soon we'll have more granular roles for files and folders showing up in OneLake. So you can actually define security on folders unknown files sitting in one lake which doesn't exist today. That is coming very, very, very soon. Don't tweet about it, but they're going to show it next week in the keynote. But I told them, like, guys, I'm going to present the same session here. Like, I don't want to give them all the information. That would suck. So more granular roles for files and security is going to come really soon. And that means that you will be able to access secure files in the lakehouse on the folder level or even on the file level too. And that gets also translated into, like, if you don't have access in the lakehouse, just like today, you will not be able to do any compute engines on top. So you will not have access. You will get an error in Power BI, for example, for it, when you do not configure that other thing that I was just talking about. Now, what does this all build up to? This does build up to universal security. And that is coming later at one point, because today, as you can see, you have to define security first on the lowest level of granularity, on the files and the tables and the folders in one lake, and then you have to redefine the security with roll-up security in their compute, like in the warehouse and then you have to do it again in roll-up security in data sets. So you have to do it a lot of times, just like, to be honest, everywhere else in many of our competitors, the same thing. What we want to be able to do is, we want you to be able to have to define security once. You define it once on files in the lake, and then it automatically gets pushed to warehouses, it automatically gets pushed to data sets or semantic models. Define it once, and it gets propagated. You don't have to worry about it on all the other levels. You can run Spark, you can run SQL, you can run DAX or MDX. It all applies to the same network security. I'm saying coming later because I don't know what the time frame is for all of it to show up, but the first step is building up towards it. When we release this more granular roles for files and folders, you can start defining it on files in the lake, and then it automatically will be pushing over at some point into the other compute engines too. So this universal security will be coming later. All right, any questions on this one? Maybe a lot. I will be at the booth too for the whole day. You can ask questions. Day-to-day residency and compliance. Another big thing. Again, with the large global footprint, Fabric allows you to do multi-geo capacities. And this is for organizations who, like for example, at Microsoft, our home tenant is in the US, but I work with customers in Germany, and the data needs to stay in Germany. Okay, I don't want it to go anywhere else. You can actually create a capacity in Germany and store all the data and save all the data in Germany and the capacity in the data center in Germany. Data will not move to the US. So you can create a data residency in the place wherever you want it to be. Now, interestingly, one lake logically spans the world, because whenever you create capacities in different places, your workspace can reside in that different region, but it can still be part of the same data lake. Someone from the US can access the data if he has access, or when I'm traveling, I do have access to that data, so I can connect to it. But it's not stored anywhere else. It's stored in the location where you have created your capacity. And again, you don't have to do anything. Like, your admin can set up the capacity somewhere, and then by default it's being stored in that location, and you don't have to worry about anything there. All right. Okay, compliance, another big thing, right? There's a lot of compliance features, a lot of compliance things that every customer probably has his own compliance feature that they really care about. And we're adding more and more and more. GDPR, EUDB, ISO certifications, HIPAA compliance. The big problem with these things is we can only start talking to these compliancy agents at the moment the product becomes GA. They don't even want to talk to us before that. So the product is GA like 2 months or something, or 3 now. So they've only started to talk to us in a month. And these are government agencies, so they take a long time. So we're working with all of these, and more certifications will come as we get them from the organizations. But yeah, we already got a lot of very important ones, like the ISO ones, like HIPAA compliance. And there are also Azure compliance services. Again, there is a document on this too, where if you want to figure out what exactly we do have, what is supported, that is there too. All right. So I want to talk about administration and governance too. Because when we talk about security, there's a lot in here that talks about administration, how do I administer, how do I govern my environment. And the first thing is, the thing that is interesting, that is not known by many people, is we can start to have delegated admin permissions. This is not something that is really rolled out a lot yet, but we're working more and more on it. So you can provide admin permissions per domain and capacity. So you can have different admin settings on a different domain, or you can have different admin settings on a capacity. Again, there's not a lot yet, but there are some things there. Now, admin and monitoring. Again, this is an important part, and this is built into the SaaS product. You can uncover insights for effective governance with reports and data sets built in for admins. But what's really important, when you want to do auditing, okay, what happened when? We have pretty sophisticated auditing features built into the product where you can actually go back and see who created a data set, who created this workspace, who deleted this report, who did export. All of this is stored and saved in the auditing tools. And you can export them too. So you can either go to the built-in UI, but you can also make an automation and store it back in one lake, in a different location where you want to do stuff about it. It's also supported in Purview Audit. So you can use Fabric built-in. You can use Purview Audit if you use auditing for your whole organization, including Azure. You can all put it in one place and then take a look at it. And I put 3 dots here because there's also APIs. I didn't have a nice API icon, so just to take 3 dots. Because you can export all the data and do whatever you want with it, too. The other thing is the monitoring hub. You can monitor activities, semantic model refresh, Spark job runs, and others from a central location, again, through monitoring hub. And then finally, capacity metrics, right? You can gain visibility into capacity utilization and usage trends. I mean, it's not really security, but still important to understand like how your capacities are doing and what's going on here. Now, the part that is really interesting here is the security and compliance features. So what are the topics and what are the things that are available here? And actually, interestingly enough, most of these features are also available in Power BI and no one knows about it. So I've done this session, I don't know, to see some familiar faces. I've done this similar session for Power BI before, where I talk about, for example, MIP labeling being available in Power BI. Many organizations that I talk to, they actually have MIP labeling enabled, for example, for Office. And when you send a Word document, it says, well, you need to label this, and you need to make sure it's compliant and all of these things. And then you go to their Power BI, and they don't have MIP labeling enabled. And I ask them, well, like, why not? It doesn't cost you a dime. It's already there. And they say, well, it's a different team. We didn't even know it's possible. But when I talk about the things that you can do with it, it is very, 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 very powerful. Like one of the most important things, for example, is, okay, I have a Power BI desktop file. We make it mandatory for people to label their Power BI reports and their dashboards. What you will get there is you label it, you forget your Power BI desktop file on the train, on a USB stick. Shouldn't have done that, but you did it anyway. You forgot it on the train. Someone goes ahead, plugs it in, copies it to their machine, tries to open the Power BI desktop file, not able to do so. Because it's MIP label protected. No one can open it. These are some features that will make sure your CFO will sleep better at night. And many, 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 many organizations actually already have this. It's sitting in their office environment, but they don't turn on the toggle to also enable it for Power BI. And you can go even further because there are many different features in here. You can combine MIP labeling, for example, with something called MCAS. So, for example, you can say, when I have highly secure devices, highly secure data, and I connect to it for my home PC, and I want to export data, I think, okay, I'm just going to export some data from this highly confidential data from my home PC. I think it's probably a good idea. My organization will actually block you from doing so. You will get an error saying you cannot do this. You can only download to Excel, or you can only download in Power BI when you're on a corporate managed device. Otherwise, we don't allow you to do so. So combining all these features, and again, it's not really a feature of either Power BI or Fabric. It is a feature of these information protection labels. And when you have an organization that has a governance team who're thinking about this from Office, you can combine a lot of these things together into a single policy plan. Right now, what is supported with information protection labels in Fabric itself is limited, but more and more are getting added all the time. Already Power BI fully supports this, so Power BI desktop data sets. Interestingly enough, for example, when you have an Excel file that is, or do you do it the other way around, when you have a Power BI desktop file, we have a semantic model, a data set where you have a report on, and you've managed to set that as highly confidential data, and you are allowed to download it to Excel, you open it up in Excel, now your Excel file will also be set to highly confidential. It's automatic, it comes with it. So it is going with it. Now the other thing, again, so, but yeah, these do need additional, it doesn't come for free with Fabric, so you need additional purview licenses. But oftentimes, as I said, if you have Office 365 and things like this, you have the licenses, then you just can turn it on for Power BI. Now, the other one that is really interesting that also no one knows about is data loss prevention policies. You can automatically detect upload of sensitive data, so as PII, and automatically trigger risk remediation and alerts. So for example, I've created this policy in my organization that I cannot have social security numbers, like in the US, social security numbers, or I cannot have credit card numbers uploaded to Power BI service at all. It's not allowed. So what you can do is you can create a policy that detects using regex, that detects, there's I think 250 built-in patterns that it can detect. If it detects one of these patterns in your Power BI desktop file or anywhere, things that you upload to the Fabric service, it will actually send a warning to a compliance officer saying, okay, well, someone uploaded a social security number or a credit card number to Fabric. And he gets a warning and he gets stopped. So it's automatic. You don't have to do anything about it. But again, this will allow you to sleep better at night and make sure that you don't upload data that is not allowed to your organization. And then finally, metadata and lineage. See the lineage. So there's many different layers of lineage in both Fabric and outside. So when you want to see the lineage of these analytical projects, you can initially see it inside of Fabric itself, right? But Fabric, it stops at the boundaries of Fabric. It doesn't go anywhere further. So when you connect from one lake to a warehouse, to a data set, to a report, that you can see inside of Fabric. You can see how data flows. But you cannot see outside. So let's say data gets loaded from SAP into OneLake through SSIS, or running on-prem, I'm just making it up, and so on and so on. All these steps we don't show you in Fabric because we don't know anything about the world outside. That's where Purview comes in. So Purview allows you to connect to Fabric, and it allows you to connect to your whole Azure estate, or even way beyond it. And then you can create a map of everything inside of that organization that is connected to everything. And then you can see in full end-to-end analytical lineage view and metadata view of everything that you have sitting inside of your organization. Now, there's lots and lots of plans that we have to integrate with them, especially with Purview, so expect more and more and more showing up there. The last thing that I want to say, again, you see the 3 dots here. It means everything, all the lineage stuff is done through APIs. So even if you have a third-party metadata or lineage product, we've worked with many of them too, you can also get lineage out of Fabric inside of those other products. So you're not bound to use Fabric, or you're not bound to use Purview. Obviously, we want you to use Purview, but you're not bound to it. Like, we really try to make it as open as possible. So we have APIs to get a whole view of your estate. And actually, interestingly enough, we've seen many people do a lot of interesting things with those APIs because you can get a nice overview of your whole organization. So you can make your own applications, your own insights. You can make your own data stores. We've seen people make like custom web applications based on these APIs that allow people to navigate the data within their organization pretty straightforward. So there's lots of things you can do with it. And yeah, with that, I am at time. We have a couple more minutes. So are there any questions? I know I talked a lot about this. If you have more questions, I'll be there, but you can ask questions here. Fabric security overview page is where you should go. We keep updating it all the time. Yeah, question. Yeah, Michael is running.
Hello. Yeah, you talked about the capacity planning or the capacity app. Now it's still like a separate app you need to install and then also upgrade. Is there any plans to just incorporate it in the user interface of Fabric itself, or
I don't think so. I'm looking at Brad if he knows, but I don't think so. No.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that was. Any more questions? I know we talked about a lot. Yeah. No, Michael has to run all the way back. Get your exercise.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So, are there any plans to have Key Vault integrated, like for credential storing and managed?
So the question, yeah, I don't have to repeat the question, but so yes, there are plans to do Key Vault integration. I don't have a timeline for it, but there are plans to do Key Vault automation, like if you want to do automated accounts and pull the credentials from Key Vault, there are definitely plans. I don't have timeline. Any more questions?
I got one. You say when you obviously create a workspace and it assigns to, a capacity for the region, right? What happens if I change the capacity for the workspace was created in one region? Will the storage move across?
So today, in Power BI, yes. In Fabric, no.
Right.
But that is something that is being worked on. And again, I don't know timelines, but moving data across from one capacity to one region to the other region is something that is not there today in Fabric, but that's something that is being worked on.
Why is not possible moving one workspace from one region to another region when it was possible before?
It was possible in Power BI, and it still is in Power BI. Yeah. We just haven't done the work.
Okay.
Like it's a pretty straightforward answer. We haven't done the work. It is being worked on, that I know. Again, I don't have any timelines. Please keep track of the release notes where we capture most of these things. But yeah, this is a common request that comes up. Oops, I made a mistake. Now I have to redo everything, which is not really great. Luckily, the APIs and the Git integration are getting better too. So it's not as hard as it used to be to move things over. But yeah, it's definitely something that we're working on. Any more questions? Last, I'll be at the booth for quite some time, so come and ask me any questions. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you.